All right, good morning, everyone. Now that new channels have been announced on the second channel, I'm trying to get into the flow of a new workflow. But today we're going to talk about some curiosities that have been happening in here. So first of all, for a while, I've had an idea of trying to source things from real life to use for digital products. Those will be things like artifacts, geological samples, actual physical artwork in real life that can then be scanned in and then sampled for 3D digital content. In that regard, I've recently picked up a really high quality scanner to do those 2D things, and I've now been unpacking some of the artifacts I've had in storage and putting them into display cases where I can see them so I can kind of bring them out and use them as needed. Sorry if you can hear dogs barking in the background. So it's been kind of interesting getting that stuff out of storage because it kind of helps to decorate the space a bit as well. So it's become a bit of a vanity project at the same time. I'll show you some images on the screen or maybe some footage. In the studio now I've got two display cases. They're just from IKEA. They're not very good. The proper display cases cost a lot of money to get. Ones that can also support a lot of weight, but they'll do the job for now. And you may notice that I've got everything pretty much sitting on bubble wrap so that the interaction between the objects and the glass doesn't cause any scratches, because that's something I want to be careful of. There are some elements that were too large to put on these internal display cases in the way of their weight rather than their actual size. So those would be like fossil pieces, particularly geological ones that come from coastal areas like Devon. So what I've done with those is instead of putting them in the display cases, I'm trying to integrate them into my reading nook area in my bedroom where they can sit on things. Like I've got these columns for books, and it also kind of feels a bit more, I don't know, inspiring, immersive, because I've been reading a fair bit about dinosaurs recently, so it's kind of nice actually having just fossils sitting there. But like I've said before, I want to invest some time into microscopy in the way of designing microscopes myself. So rather than actual point down microscopes onto sample, rather tube microscopes which I can then migrate around a pivot point so we can have a look at surface samples up close, that kind of thing. But that'll be something further down the line. It's just an idea for interesting ways to integrate real life materials into digital space, and it will come in combination with the HexScatter project. If you know, HexScatter is the collaboration project with myself and Chris, finding more interesting ways of turning non-seamless samples into seamless materials and solving a whole bunch of projection issues while we're at it. So I'm not going to be working on that yet, but what I've been doing with getting stuff out of storage and now on display is just making it easier so that when the time comes, I can see exactly what I have, so I can take it out into the studio, analyze it, work with it, and then put it back into its home. I also need to do a bit of like admin organization with stuff like that because this stuff was picked up from auction, and part of the auction process is provenance. Provenance meaning the paper trail, essentially, so the history of every item, which can include where it was purchased, who by, who it belonged to prior to that. And the provenance trail for different items is often incomplete or inadequate, which is a problem because you may or may not have fake items in the collection. So there's a very good possibility that something I have is fake, right? Which is fine. Like, sure, it's disappointing from like the historical perspective, but it's also still useful as a physical object to scan in. So provenance could include not just the actual historical trail of who's owned something and how it's been purchased to lend some credibility. It could also include things like analysis or reports from specialists. So if there's anything that I am suspicious about, it would be interesting to try and get someone to take a look at it at some point and then add that to the provenance record for it. It's also been interesting that when getting stuff out of storage, I've kind of forgotten what I actually had in storage. I've forgotten how many items I had. And there are some things where they are historic, but they haven't been properly identified yet. So in one particular case, from someone's collection, I have a collection of items that can range anywhere from Roman to like the medieval and early modern period, but they just don't know what they are. They know there are weights in there. They know there are like belt buckles. It's like, you know, really low importance items. And in some cases, things which have been brought up from like the silt of the Thames. So the Thames River is pretty much just like a rubbish bin for all of history around the area. Stuff gets thrown in, it gets covered up by the sediment and the silt. Over time, you know, as the tides move and as construction moves in and out of the banks, things get kicked back up. And there are a lot of people that walk around the bank of the Thames with like metal detectors and just scouring through the mud, trying to find different things. So for example, there's one thing that's been listed as a Roman medical probe head. To me, it looks more just like an arrowhead, but the same kind of shape may have served multiple purposes. One of my favorite things in my collection is a horse harness mount piece, so made of metal, and it's got the England coat of arms on it. This was actually picked up from Romney Marsh, and this one is, I think, the coolest thing in the collection because its corrosion is inconsistent to the point where it's definitely been dulled down over time and it's hard to make out the original like pattern of the coat of arms, but some areas of it are still reflective, and I really like that you can kind of hold it up to the light and see how shiny it is even though it's been all this time. So to be specific, I've got some information here. 14th century AD, so 1300s. That particular one was found in Romney Marsh in Kent, which is southeast. The particular coat of arms displayed on it were the arms of the kings of England between 1198 to 1340, and then afterwards 1360 to 1369. And thankfully, in terms of provenance, they've also given me a piece of literature, like a source to read up, where another instance of the same type of item has been found in a piece of literature by another archaeologist from 2002. So that's really cool. So yeah, that's just something I'll put on the back burner for a while, and then I'll see how things go. I might get another display case. I was originally going to put some of my projects in there, like the 3D printed Lance Helper to extract capillary blood. But now the two display cases I've got represent human history and natural history. So in that regard, there's no room for modern projects. So I might get another one. As for today, I've got a whole bunch of recording tasks to do for the new channels. I've just released the Blender 4.3 new feature release video. That was a bit of a rushed one to do because the update released a little bit late yesterday. So I had to push back my dinner to get the recording done. Then I spent the entire evening and night pretty much editing, preparing the admin, and then getting that out. So let me just check the status of that. Yeah, people seem to be enjoying it, and it kind of ties into, looking at the new channels now, the purposes going into the future. The main channel seems like it's effectively going to be a news reporting channel in some way more than anything else. But another thing I need to do now is I need to put out a request on my Discord and maybe the other socials asking for some community involvement for some potential future videos for the main channel. So, like fun ones. I want to rate people's setups and do fun things like that. And I'm keen at the moment to start another series or a couple of series relating to video games and movies. In particular, there's one little thing I want to do. I don't know how people will react to it. Hunting for inspiration. So one thing I like doing when I play video games is, I just like the vibe. I like looking around at different things. And if there's ever a photo mode in a game, I'm always taking pictures. But I wondered if there's any utility in this. Literally sitting down on video, walking around, capturing inspiration, which we can then store for later reference. I don't know if there's a way to make that interesting to watch by itself. Something else that may be more useful is having already done that, then analyzing the references and kind of giving breakdowns on how we might recreate different styles of that in something like Blender. So for that one, which may be functionally more useful because it's more educational, where does that fall? Does that fall under the Blender Halt channel now, which would be more on the grounds Blender, boots on the ground Blender? Or if that's more of a generalized overview, does that go on the main channel? Or I can do tests. Test it on the main channel. If it doesn't work, migrate it to Blender Halt, where it would fit in with more on the ground type content. So that's something I'll need to test. I need to do the introduction to the Parasocial Therapy channel and also send requests to other creators. So one thing I wanted to do for Parasocial Therapy, as well as my regular discussions, were to get interviews of sorts with other creators. Not necessarily live ones in the way of like a podcast, but more of I will just hand them some questions. They can, in their own time, respond to them, whether through text, and then I will read it and discuss it on the channel. Or maybe they could respond in the form of a video or audio, and we will listen together on Parasocial Therapy and talk about that in the way of maybe it helps people watching learn more about how other creators have developed over time and how their cognition has changed. And then hopefully if we get that going, maybe doing that over time as well. Something I found interesting is that I've seen them do it with some celebrities online, particularly Billie Eilish, where they get them to come back and like do the same interview again and again and then see how their answers have changed over time. Seems like an interesting thing to do for creators maybe. We've also got a note here that I want myself to record a new exclusive video for patrons and YouTube members under a series we have about principles of creation. And this particular video will be about managing a community and kind of being a bit of an abstract personality because you have to deal with a lot of good and bad personalities when running a community. So there are some notes to talk about in that regard. In terms of managing lots of social accounts, which is a video we did a little while ago here on the studio channel, people found it quite weird that I wanted to have multiple computer setups. I'm experimenting with different things still. At the moment, I'm trying to do it all on one, as a lot of people suggested, but that has also come up with some problems. One of the accounts got temporarily suspended. That was a Blender Halt Instagram account because I think it was suspicious. It was getting suspicious that I was logging in and out like of things all the time. So I had to appeal that, which is great. It makes me wonder if it wouldn't have happened if I was already just doing it on different computers like I said I would have done. But there was also a problem where, because we've been having work done on this house, I'd be able to cut through our internet cable, which is great. So I had to keep hotspotting through mobile cellular data and going to the hotspot, which is I think when I created the accounts and then moving back onto regular internet may have flagged up as suspicious as well, but who knows. But anyway, I'll get on with work. I'll leave you there. Hope you're doing well. Leave any emoji in the comments if you made it this far, and I will see you next time.